the ANWR is developed, it has to be done in a way that does not substantially affect the wildlife that live there. It's a national wildlife refuge. The law says that if you develop in an area like that, it has to be done in a way that's consistent with the original purpose of the ANWR.
Oil development and environmental conservation should go hand in hand on the coastal plain of ANWR. There's no only one or the other.
Most caribou biologists are not game to make a prediction on what the herd numbers are going to do in the next 10 years, but then we must then predict what the herd would do in association with oil development. Again, an even more tenuous prediction.
Remember, our residents, as previously noted, enjoy the comforts provided by the tax revenue. However, our cultural heritage and our subsistence lifestyle is #1 priority. I believe the petroleum industry is well aware that in order to promote development, they must work within the framework of the cultural and subsistence requirements.
The congressional debate over oil and gas development on the coastal plain of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, or ANWR, can be narrowed down to one fundamental issue. Can oil development take place while at the same time safeguarding wildlife and protecting the environment? Even by conservative estimates, ANWR's coastal plain is the most promising oil field in North America. The U.S. Department of Interior estimates there may be more than 9 billion barrels of recoverable oil in ANWR. The recent flare-up in the Middle East is yet one more example why the U.S. needs to become as energy self-sufficient as possible and minimize its dependence on oil producers in unstable political regions of the world. Right now, the U.S. imports more than 50% of all its oil, weakening the economy, exporting American jobs, and seriously undermining national security by creating a dangerous reliance on foreign countries to fuel the U.S. Development in ANWR will provide a more secure, substantial, and dependable source of crude oil. Every region of the country benefits from Alaska's North Slope oil fields, which now provide 25% of the nation's total domestic crude oil. Between 1980 and 1986 alone, Alaska North Slope development accounted for more than $17 billion being spent in all 50 states. If a Prudhoe Bay-sized discovery is made in the ANWR coastal plain, development could yield a net national economic benefit of $325 billion and would lower America's trade deficit. Despite the development of alternative fuel and energy sources and America's best energy conservation efforts, oil will continue to be the most important energy resource for many years to come. There simply is nothing that can replace oil as a fuel source at this time. In 1989, the giant oil field, Prudhoe Bay on the North Slope, which accounts for more than 20% of U.S. oil output, produced its 5 billionth barrel, more than one-half of its total proven reserves. Production from the North Slope continues to decline. Development in ANWR will significantly help offset that inevitable decline. In 1960, Congress created the Arctic National Wildlife Range, consisting of 8.9 million acres. 6 years later, it became part of the National Wildlife Refuge System. In 1980, Congress more than doubled ANWR to 19 million acres and set aside 8 million acres as wilderness, thereby restricting development of any kind on more than 40% of the refuge. However, due to the enormous potential of a major oil find, Congress left the door open for development on the coastal plain. Today, Congress is considering whether to make ANWR part of a comprehensive national energy strategy. The 19 million acre Arctic National Wildlife Refuge lies in the northeast corner of Alaska. It's bordered on the north by the Beaufort Sea, on the east by the U.S.-Canadian border, and on the west by the Canning River. The entire refuge lies north of the Arctic Circle. The coastal plain is 120 miles long by roughly 30 miles wide. It's a relatively flat, treeless expanse covered with tundra. Technically, it's a desert, receiving only 6 inches of precipitation a year, primarily through snowfall, which covers the ground 3/4 of the year. The land is frozen most of the year, and during winter the sun disappears for 60 days and temperatures can reach 50 degrees below zero. According to the Interior Department, the total area directly and indirectly affected by oil development would comprise about 19 square miles, less than 1% of the coastal plain. There are 4 caribou herds on Alaska's North Slope. The 180,000-head Porcupine River caribou herd migrates onto ANWR's coastal plain for up to 12 weeks each summer, and it uses a portion of this area as a calving ground. Oil development has had no discernible negative impact on the other 3 North Slope caribou herds that move through oil production areas. In fact, each herd has continued to thrive and grow significantly since oil development came to the region in the 1970s. Still, it's a matter of speculation what effect oil development might have on the porcupine herd.
Predictions for what's likely to happen in the porcupine herd and in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge are extremely difficult. I think the herd has been growing at a reasonable rate, and it may be getting close to its carrying capacity. Therefore, what the herd does in associated with development, if it was to occur fairly in the near future, is that we might see the herd stop its growth rate and perhaps start to decline in association with the early stages of oil development that could have nothing to do with oil development, but because the herd is going through a natural biological process.
At the University of Alaska Institute of Arctic Biology, they study caribou, and physiologist Professor Robert White is an expert on these cousins to reindeer. He asserts that there are 2 general areas of environmental quality control that must be implemented if the porcupine caribou are to continue thriving.
One is that the quality of the food resource is not lowered in any way. The Arctic coastal plain is a rich habitat, but the biomass of food is limited. The other thing that we must do is to minimize any chance of pollution in the environment by fallout from any kind of associated activities that go on. Somewhat this is dust, but a lot of it is minerals that may fall out from pumping stations and this kind of thing.
The oil fields on Alaska's North Slope stand as a model of evolving Arctic technology. Over the years, important strides have been made in drilling and production techniques that have reduced the amount of land needed for oil field activities. Wells and facilities are placed on gravel pads, which dissipate heat and insulate the permafrost from thawing. Using directional drilling, dozens of oil wells can be drilled from the same pad, thereby minimizing surface use. Camp buildings are clustered together. Ice roads disappear in the summer, and huge transport vehicles called rolagons protect the tundra by spreading pressure over a wide area. In fact, they exert less force than someone walking and can roll over a person without causing harm. In addition, oil pipelines are elevated at least 5 feet so that caribou can make their way underneath. One of the most significant advances is waste handling technology. A major byproduct of drilling used to be large reserve waste pits to hold mud, cuttings, and fluids from the wells. Now reserve pits contain only the solid cuttings removed from the well. Fluids are either injected back into the well or placed in another well. This alone has reduced the area of a well pad by more than 1/2. Still, oil drilling is intrusive no matter where it's done. Afterwards, though, restoration is possible.
From the beginning on the North Slope, we've known that we're going to have to restore the area. So we've been thinking about this. It's a long ways in the future, but we've been thinking about and experimenting. And we've experimented with seeding on bare gravel, for instance. How do you get grass and native plants to grow on the bare gravel pads that we have there? And we've had some pretty good successes. I think we can take you out and show you spots in the tundra that are really greener than tundra that we've learned to do. So we've been experimenting with that. Likewise with the gravel pits, for instance, which we've mined, and there are these holes. We found when we fill them with water and stock them with fish, they actually become overwintering for the fish. Most of the lakes on the North Slope are very shallow, so they freeze solid in the wintertime, and they really can't support fish. But our gravel pits, because they are deep, they don't freeze all the way to the bottom. So these turn out to be actually enhancements to the wildlife. So this is something that we'll be able to leave that will actually enhance wildlife.
Life in Alaska's Arctic can be harsh, expensive, and for many, short. Like other Americans, North Slope Eskimos want decent homes, electricity, good medical care, sanitation services, fire protection, and a quality education for their children. Oil production provides jobs and economic stability to the region. It is essentially their only revenue base, and it's no wonder that an overwhelming majority of North Slope residents favor ANWR development.
The position of the North Slope Borough to opening of ANWR is yes. We've been saying this for quite some time, not only us, but the other municipalities as well. Remember, the largest percentage of the North Slope Borough tax base comes from the taxes paid by the petroleum industry on facilities and installations onshore. Our current tax base, on which the CIP program and the main operating budget is financed, is declining. The North Slope Borough needs new taxable resources to provide the operating funds and maintenance needed for the existing North Slope Borough facilities and new projects that our residents need and require.
Governor Steve Cooper knows ANWR, its people, its wildlife, and its terrain. He understands what oil development means and the effect it will have.
The question that we have raised is whether the industry is going to do it right or not. In order to assure ourselves that exploration and development is done in a responsible manner, there has to be government oversight. Government has to be sure that the calving grounds of the porcupine caribou herd are not disturbed during that period of time when the herd comes in and does its calving. The development facilities that are put on the ground have to be put there in a way that does not block the caribou herd's access to their migration routes or to the routes to the sea later on in the summer. However, that can be done. It's up to government to see that those very careful restrictions are put on the development.
The fate of ANWR is in the hands of the American people. Their elected representatives will be making the decision whether to open the coastal plain for development. The federal government and the state of Alaska also will be charged with overseeing and enforcing environmental regulations and safeguards, as well as stipulating how the plain is to be restored once production has come to a halt. Oil extraction in remote frontier territory like ANWR takes time. Even after a decision is made to go forward with development, it will be at least 10 to 12 years for production to come online. Meanwhile, U.S. oil production is dwindling. By 1995, the federal government estimates that domestic oil production will have declined by 2 million barrels a day. That promises to have far-reaching effects on the U.S. economy if it's not replaced. Previous experience has shown that wildlife, specifically caribou, can coexist and thrive alongside oil production facilities. But before ANWR is opened, stringent controls must be in place to assure the safety of those animals and to minimize environmental impact. It can be done, and the state of Alaska looks forward to working with Congress and the American people to make sure it's done right.